Hello, my fellow vibrations. At the quantum level, there is no difference between matter and vibration. That's why sound vibrations can affect us on a subatomic level and cause chemical reactions called emotions, or some might call them feels. Have you noticed more synchronicities with other people lately? That's because as we approach the end of our current 25,000-year cycle of reincarnation, we are actually observing infinite versions of ourselves approach the one divine consciousness that is currently imagining what we call reality. And the progression of intervals, musical intervals, through the chromatic scale is a metaphorical journey through the dualistic illusion of an incarnate lifetime. Allow me to personally introduce you to these intervals so that you can be more attuned to notice and follow these synchronistic messages into the next density level. And now first let me remind you of what a chromatic scale is. It's a half-tone scale, or a scale moving up by half steps. So for example, if you're moving through every key on a piano, this key, to 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 this key, you're going up by half steps. You're playing a chromatic scale. Same thing if you move through every fret on a fretted instrument. This fret, 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 fret. So what do you call 2 half steps? A whole step, duh. So that's where you skip one piano key or one fret. So here you're skipping this black key here, going to this key. From here to here, that's a whole step, 2 half steps. And the word frequency, when describing a musical tone, refers to the frequency of sine waves per second, measured in hertz, that a pitch creates. So for example, A440 is the pitch at 440 hertz. It's the pitch perceived when an object is vibrating at 440 waves per second. And if the waves get longer, then the pitch goes down. And if the waves get shorter, then the pitch goes up. So if you go from 440 to 1 half step higher, so here's A440 on the piano. If you go 1 half step higher to A sharp or B flat, you're actually now at B flat 446.164. And there are more waves fitting into 1 second now when you're up here than when you're down here. So if you play 2 pitches together, the size of their sine waves, so you're going big, 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 and then like slightly smaller, they're going to be at the same time, and they're going to fit a little bit differently depending on how much you're increasing or decreasing these sine waves. So sometimes they fit together somewhat evenly, and that creates a pleasant, easy listening experience for our aural senses. Or they fit together kind of wonkily, and that creates a more challenging or dissonant aural sensation. So a note will fit perfectly mathematically in its octaves. So if you have A440 and you went up a whole octave to the next A, then you would be at A880 and so on. And if you went down from A440 down an octave, you'd be at A220. So those fit perfectly. And we can start this explanation anywhere, but let's just start at middle C as our pivot point, as the first note to go up an interval from, just for funsies. So if 2 middle C's are played together, I can show you this on the guitar. Here's a middle C, but you could also play that 1 string down up here. You play them together. My hands are too small to actually play that, but here we go. You can't really hear any difference. You're playing the same note. And so that's called a unison, and it's like the union union with the all, the creator, that we experience before birth and after death. So now, if you played a C and the very next step up, a C sharp or a D flat, you're playing an interval called a minor second. And there's 1/2 step in between. And it's pretty dissonant, kind of like the shock of being born or first perceiving the other in dualistic consciousness. So you have your C. I'll play it here on the string below so I can play both strings. Kind of scary. It's kind of like a shark approaching. Okay. So if you played the C and skipped a piano key or one guitar fret and went up to that D natural, you're now playing an interval called a major second. Still somewhat dissonant, yet hopeful, ready to move on from the initial shock of that minor second, that shock of being born into duality and reality, of first perceiving the other. So it's after that, and now you're past the initial shock, and you're ready to explore further. So it sounds kind of like this. A little more, it's dissonant, but there's a little more hopefulness in that. Now, at 1.5 steps away, so let me show you 1.5 steps. C, 2 of those steps will make 1, and then 1 more. So now we're at E flat, or D sharp, if we're starting at C. And we're now a minor third away. So let's play those together. It's not dissonant anymore, but it's sad. And sadness is beautiful and catalyzes evolution and growth. So something good is coming. And that good thing, at the distance of 2 whole tones, is a major third. After that further exploration and the sadness that came with it, now we have a celebration of the spiritual harvest that comes out of all of that transformational sadness. Next we have a perfect fourth. Oh, wow, that sounds great. The wavelengths of these 2 pitches fit perfectly, pretty much, at 2.5 steps apart. It's not dissonant at all, and they go so swimmingly well that they could get married. Here comes the bride, that's a perfect fourth. That's perfect because they're fitting together perfectly. But go up yet another 1/2 step, and you're 3 whole tones away from your starting point, and those 3 tones gives it the name a tritone. That's basically the midlife crisis stage of the chromatic scale, the halfway point between the unison and the octave. And it's considered so dissonant that historically it was nicknamed the devil's interval. But enlightened purveyors of musical composition often artfully employ this delightfully devilish dissonance. Okay. Now I can move up to these top 2 strings where my hand fits. It'd be better if I had a piano, but I don't, so I gotta use my little hands on my guitar. So, we're out of that tritone now, and we're 3.5 steps away, and we're at another perfect interval again, called a perfect fifth. And at this point, we're so relieved from being out of all that sadness and discovery and hopefulness, and dissonance and the devil, and now the happiness after getting away from the devil. At this point, the hero of the chromatic journey could die now and be happy, back in unison consciousness. But we also have the option, now that we've gotten halfway through the intervals, to transcend that cycle by recognizing and integrating the shadow interval that exists in relation to the next octave. So we started on this C. That's the octave above it. If you want a visual, here it is on the piano, C, and then all the way up to this C. They fit together perfectly, but they have a shadow relation to the note that you're playing on your journey in between them. And so if we ascend in pitch from C to a perfect fifth to G, we also have arrived at the pitch that is a perfect fourth below the next C. So, there it is. So they're pretty similar because they're both perfect, but even the circle of fifths, you might remember, moves in fifths in one direction, but it's also called the circle of fourths because it moves in fourths in the other direction. But it's the same circle with the same notes on it. So, next, coming up, we have the minor six. So we were at, right, there we go. We were at that perfect fifth, but we're now going up to this minor six. Can I reach that? Kind of. Maybe if I could put it down again like I did before. So that minor six, it's kind of dark, kind of ominous pairing of notes, but at the same time, that same note, that A flat, since I'm going up from C, is a major third away from the next C above it. So if you are oriented towards the next octave instead of living in the past, you have a bright and optimistic third again. Whoa, so optimistic. Everything looks different in retrospect, right? So similarly, going up to the major six, 4.5 tones away from your first note now. Your first note is the C. You go up. My body lies over the ocean. Okay. There it is. Okay, now I can play that. That sounds a lot more, in comparison to the minor six, now we have a pleasant, warmly nostalgic overlay of sound waves here. I hope you can hear this. But it is also a sad, frightening minor third away from the first note's higher octave. So we're playing that same note, but that's its relationship to where it's going. Okay, now at the minor 7, starting at C, going up to the B, flat, we are a minor 7th away. And at this point, we see the light at the end of the tunnel that is a return to unison. And it's expectant and somewhat dissonant. Let's see if I can play this. Find a way to reach it. about all this. I have very small hands. That's interesting. It's dissonant. You hear that, but it's expectant. Something's about to happen. And it's also a major second down from the pivot point's octave. So it sounds like this. Major second. It's kind of like the bittersweet final years of a dualistic lifetime. Now the final interval, a major seventh, away from C, that'll be a B natural. Now we have, that's rather beautiful. I think. It's kind of a tears of joy kind of aural sensation, as it's time to step off into the next octave. And the irony of this term, tears of joy, is appropriate because that B is also a minor second. I'm playing the wrong note. There we go, minor second, down from that octave. And the pitch juxtaposition that once shocked and frightened is now tears of joy. It's the same note, same feeling, just different perspective. So basically, minor seconds and major sevenths are the DMT of the interval world. They come just after birth and just before death. And with that, you hear that? No different. Sounds like one note. With that, you've made it to your new octave. Congratulations and welcome home.